Hello. If you want to file for divorce without an attorney and you do not have any children under 18 years old, you can use this form: Complaint for Divorce Without Minor Children. Usually, you file for divorce in the county where your spouse lives. In the first blank, fill in the Superior Court of, in this example, I'll use Cobb County. Sometimes you can file where you live. If it has been less than 6 months since your spouse moved out of your marital home, or if your spouse lives out of state. You are the plaintiff or petitioner. Your spouse is the defendant or respondent. Leave the civil action number blank until you file. The clerk will give you a civil action number. Put your name in the next blank. Paragraph 1. The first paragraph talks about subject matter jurisdiction, or where your case must be filed. For the court to be able to hear your case, you must have lived in Georgia for at least the past 6 months. If not, your spouse must have lived in Georgia for at least the past 6 months. Just check one box, A or B. Paragraph 2 talks about venue. Venue is usually the county where your spouse lives. Check only one box. A, the defendant is a resident of blank county, the county where your spouse lives now. B, if your spouse has moved from your county within the past 6 months, you can file in that county for 6 months after you separate. In the first box, put the name of the county where she or he lives now, but in the second box, put the county where you two live together and you still live. C. If your spouse agrees that you can file in your county, you must attach a form called an acknowledgement that your spouse must sign in front of a notary. D. If your spouse lives out of state but you live in Georgia, you can still get a divorce. You can get a divorce if your spouse, 1, has lived in Georgia before, or 2, your spouse was never a resident of Georgia, or 3, your spouse agrees that the case can be heard in Georgia and signs an acknowledgement of service, venue, and jurisdiction. In this case, the court can award a divorce, but may not be able to decide everything, like divide some property or debts that you got during the marriage. Paragraph 3. Service of process means that the defendant, your spouse, usually must get a copy of the divorce papers. A. The spouse can sign a form acknowledging she or he got a copy of the complaint, or the sheriff's office can deliver a copy of the papers to her or his home or work. Fill in the home and work address of your spouse. If your spouse lives out of state, you can send a copy of the complaint to the sheriff's office in the county in the other state and ask them to deliver the complaint to your spouse. Usually the sheriff will charge you to deliver a copy of your complaint. C. If you do not know where your spouse is, you can still file for divorce. You must show you tried to find your spouse before you file for divorce. You can ask her or his family, friends, or look on social media to try to find your spouse. If you cannot find where your spouse is, you'll have to file a motion for publication and an affidavit of due diligence saying you tried to find your spouse. See Form Motion and Affidavit in this packet. Paragraph 4. Fill in the date you married your spouse in A, or if you were married by common law before January 1, 1997, then you can fill in the date prior to January 1, 1997, when you started holding yourself out as married. Paragraph 5. Fill in the date you were separated from your spouse. Paragraph 6. Check the box next to paragraph 6 if you signed a settlement agreement. A settlement agreement is a document that says you and your spouse agree that you should get divorced and agree on the terms of the divorce. Both you and your spouse must sign a settlement agreement in front of a notary. Then you can file it with the complaint. See the Form Settlement Agreement. Paragraph 7. Check A if you don't have children under 18 together. Check B if you have minor children. If you have minor children, you need another divorce complaint form. Stop here and get another form. Paragraph 8. Alimony. Check box A or B or C. Check box A if you're asking the court to award alimony because you depend on your spouse for your support. Check box B if you are not asking for alimony. Box C means that the court does not have jurisdiction over your spouse. For example, she or he lives out of state and has never lived in Georgia. Paragraph 9. If you have property, check one box. Dividing property like real estate, pensions, or investments can get very complicated. Check A if you have already divided the property you got during your marriage and you are both satisfied with the division. Check B if you and your spouse do not have any property you got during the marriage, so you do not need the court to divide it. Check C if you have property you got during the marriage and you want the court to divide the property. You should describe the property like a house, other real estate, mobile home, pensions, cars or trucks, furniture, bank accounts, or other investments, or other property. You can also list these on separate pages and attach them to this complaint. Or check D, the court cannot divide property because, for example, the spouse is out of state or you haven't been able to get jurisdiction of your spouse. 10. Joint or marital debts. Check only A, B, or C. Check A if you do not have joint debts. Check B if you want the court to divide the debts, including the creditor who you owe the debt to, the amount you owe, and which person should pay the debt. Check C if the court does not have jurisdiction to divide the debts. 11. If you have been the victim of domestic violence and you are afraid, you can ask the court for a restraining order telling your spouse to stay away from you. 12. If you want the court to change your name back to what it was before you were married, check this box and put in the former name you want the court to give back to you. 13. The grounds for divorce are in Georgia law. You can check A, B, C, D, or E if you have another ground that is in the Georgia law. Most divorces in Georgia are filed because the marriage is irretrievably broken. That means one party says that the marriage is broken and there is no hope of getting back together. If you choose to file based on cruel treatment, you must be able to prove the cruel treatment at trial, and you should explain the cruel treatment here. You only need one ground, but you can put in as many as apply and that you can prove at trial. Lastly, you'll ask the court for relief. What do you want the court to do in this divorce case? Check A, you want a divorce. Check B, if you have a settlement agreement you want included by the court in your divorce. If you ask for alimony above, you check box C. If you ask the court to divide marital property or marital debts, check boxes D or E. If your spouse was violent and you want a restraining order, check box F. If you want your name changed back to what it was before you were married, check box G. Box H asks the court to schedule a rule nisi or a hearing to hear your facts, your case, and what you want the court to do in this divorce. Check the last box to cover anything else the court might find it should do. You must date and sign this form, the complaint. Fill in your name, address, and phone number. You will take the complaint along with other forms you have completed to the Superior Court Clerk's office where you are filing your divorce. You must file a verification with this form, which swears that everything in this complaint is true. The verification form must be signed and notarized.